I created my first newspaper when I was a boy. I got a sheet of A4 paper and a biro and a ruler and made some boxes and filled in a few stories about what was happening in our home and in the world around me. And then I photocopied it and tried to flog it to my family for 10p a copy. Not realising, of course, that they were paying all the production costs. But I've always been fascinated by the power of words and how we can use them to uncover what's going on in the world, to explore it, present it, share it, and in particular to unearth the human potential. So journalism is focused on facts, but in selecting and framing information, it creates stories. And cognitive science tells us that it's through narratives that we create a sense of meaning from the world. And we know that the story that the media largely creates is one of doom and gloom. And as Martin has already indicated, of course that's not the full picture. It's a tiny fragment that's magnified. But this has massive implications. And it's easy to forget that the wider reality is, according to the Harvard professor Steven Pinker, for example, that the world is actually more peaceful than it's ever been. We're not seeing the scale of wars and number of deaths that we're used to. And although there's been a recent spike, the number of wars and conflicts taking place worldwide is falling. Homicides are falling around the world. On the whole, we're healthier than we've ever been. There's more democracies in the world now. We're making progress on various other social issues, even though there may be a long way to go with things like violence against women and violence against children. So as Jodie mentioned, the effect of the news on us is significant, and there's an emerging body of research which is identifying this. It's showing that negative news can lead to mental health issues, anxiety and depression, reduction of trust. It can lead to a heightened sense of threat in our environment, can lead to helplessness and passivity, it can disengage us from society. But there's an emerging body of research which is showing that, on the other hand, a positive approach does the opposite. So positive news stories benefit our well-being, but also they can engage us more in society. Most recently, new research from the University of Southampton has shown that when we take a more positive or constructive approach in stories, that people feel more likely, more compelled to take pro-social actions, such as donating to charity or taking action to protect the environment, or to voice their opinions. And there's some really interesting science that relates to this. So the positive emotion specialist, Barbara Fredrickson, has found that when we experience positive emotions, our bodies release the chemical oxytocin. And this is sometimes known as the cuddle drug because it's released when we hug. You've had a good hug, haven't you, recently? And there's probably plenty of good oxytocin in this room when you were chatting. Because the neuroscientist Paul Zak has found that oxytocin correlates with increased levels of trust and with empathy and with generosity. We release oxytocin when we connect. So what really excites me about this knowledge is what it makes me think is possible for us individually and collectively when we think about the emotional impact of news. So if we become more aware of the emotional impact of news and take this into consideration how we report, if we were to bring the skills and experience and the resources of our media to creating a more positive story, then what would this do for social cohesion? Journalism has done an exceptional job and continues to do so in creating freedom, pushing for justice, and promoting development. And investigative journalism in particular plays such a valuable role in revealing the truth, uncovering wrongdoing, and holding power to account. And these things are very valuable and must continue. But we can create a fuller picture that I think will allow us to create a more flourishing world. So at the moment, with this research in mind, the way we're reporting is limiting the social benefit of our news. But as Martin's already indicated, we're now seeing this change begin to happen. There's an emerging field of constructive journalism and solutions journalism, which is about bringing more positive elements into traditional reporting. So I think we still need to shed more light on positive stories. And this is happening too. In the footsteps of positive news, there's other organisations online that are rising all over the world publishing more positive stories. So bringing these positive developments to light. Things like in Portugal, where they've halved heroin use by connecting drug users with communities rather than sending them to jail. Or recently in Wales, where they've created legislation to protect future generations from the impacts of climate change, which means their public bodies have to bring sustainability to the heart of what they do. Or in London, where in schools they've been bringing in small babies to interact with the children in order to foster empathy. And there's real hard data which is showing that this is leading to a reduction of bullying and aggression in school children and increasing their emotional intelligence. But as well as stories that are focused on positive developments, the emerging field of constructive journalism is not so particularly about what we're reporting, but more about how we're reporting. This is about innovating and strengthening journalism. We're developing new techniques, learning from the kind of research that I just mentioned, and learning from other fields like the behavioral sciences. So what we're finding is that we can report difficult statistics and facts and social issues, environmental issues, but through a lens that finds a positive story. As Martin suggested, there's always a positive response. Somewhere life is thriving, somewhere people are responding in a positive way to the challenges. And we can address them through this lens where we see where the path forward is being paved. And we're looking at things like interview technique. So not only are we asking questions about the past, but also asking questions about the future. And we're asking questions that uncover people's strengths, questions that uncover their resilience, their ideas and their creativity, rather than just questions which reveal their victimization. And research by a pioneer of constructive journalism, Catherine Goldenstead in Denmark, has shown that if we structure an article, even about a piece predominantly that's about bad news, if we structure it with a positive peak in the middle and a solution-focused conclusion, this is the structure that readers find most trustworthy and become most engaged with. And with this structure, it was shown that they remember the most story-related information. And with this approach in mind, and the fact that, as Martin highlighted, social media and the digital publishing platforms are challenging the news industry so much, we're seeing a new openness to this form of reporting. And it's about taking the idea of positive stories out of the box they've been put in of fluffy and light and irrelevant, and showing how they're an important part of a strong and balanced journalism. So now media organizations all around the world are hooking onto this approach. So Huffington Post, they've seen that when they publish positive stories, they get 3 times as many shares on social media as their other content. And it's social media that's increasingly driving traffic to news websites. So they've just announced a global editorial strategy to focus on stories about what's working in the world and are consulting with us on how to make this happen. We're seeing media organizations in South Africa trying to bring in constructive journalism techniques, broadcasters in Denmark, in Sweden. Al Jazeera is trying to publish inspiring stories and tell positive human stories. In Holland, there's a new media organization called The Correspondent, which has a constructive reporter. So we're now seeing growing interest in this approach, which is very heartening. And I think we're seeing this because we're reaching peak negativity. As the world changes and the media industry changes, then we're realizing that we can do things differently. And this isn't something that's just happening in the media, and I can see this through the stories that we report on. As Jodie suggested, psychology has branched into positive psychology, and Action for Happiness exists because we're looking at how can we really thrive. And across society, you can see it in management theory and business as well. We're not so focused just on the problems and correcting what's wrong and blame and criticism, but now we're starting to look at where is life flourishing? What can we look to learn in order to grow? And so for the media, this offers an approach to engage our audiences more deeply and tell a more compelling story. The old story of doom and gloom is no longer serving us. And what I'm hearing from audiences and from the journalists and editors I talk to when we're doing our training is that there's an authenticity gap between the story that we're telling and we're sharing and what we really can see is the full truth, and what we really feel intuitively is the full truth of human existence and what's important, and our evolving sense of what is possible. So, like the child creating his own newspaper, we can all choose how to frame this world with the understanding that that affects our experience of it. We can all choose what stories we give our attention to and the story that will define this life for us. Now, if you want to be a part of making this happen, of spreading this approach into the media as a whole, then now's your chance, because I'm going to give positive news to you. We're creating a new cooperative organisation which is going to own Positive News. And we're going to give you the chance to become shareholders so that you can own the media. At the moment, the media in this country is owned by a handful of people. So we believe that the readers should own the media so that we're duty-bound to report in your interest. So we're going to be creating this cooperative, crowdfunding and doing a share offer so that you can own it, become part of it, and in doing so you can support us and we can raise the funds we need to scale up what we're doing. We're going to be bringing in new staff and resources, new expertise, launching a whole new digital proposition, revamping our publication, and pushing our training arm, the Constructive Journalism Project, in order to spread our learnings and our approach into the rest of the media. So you're among the first to hear about this, and we're going to keep you informed. But I want to ask you tonight in particular, if there's anybody who wants to help with this campaign, we're looking for volunteers to support and spread it, because we're a very small team. So if you're interested, please come and talk to me and my team are sitting over there, and we'd love you to get involved. So thank you very much for listening.